Welcome to the Ivan Herrera Show. Week 1 is already here among us, and we have some pretty intriguing matchups to be going over, but we're going to be also recapping what we saw this past Thursday with the Philadelphia Eagles and Dallas Cowboys. We're also going to dive into the Chargers getting a huge win versus the Chiefs in Brazil, and we're also going to go over, just like I said, some must-start players that you got to add on your fantasy rosters in Week 1. For starters, the drama was impalpable there in Philadelphia for opening night for the NFL, and of course the controversy began before a play was even snapped when you saw Jalen Carter and Dak Prescott to get into an exchange that inevitably led to Jalen Carter being disqualified and ejected for spitting on Dak Prescott. And a few thoughts here, just as an Eagles fan, I just cannot reiterate how much of a boneheaded play that was for Jalen Carter. There are different conversations about what's going to be happening, whether there'll be a suspension. Philadelphia is going to be facing Kansas City, who just came off a very disappointing loss that we'll go over very briefly. However, for me, what I saw, here's my main takeaway from what I saw from this game. Dak Prescott looks fantastic. It is great to see him healthy, and for those that have him in fantasy, I know he didn't put up much of a matchup that makes you feel confident in fantasy. However, what we saw with his mobility and his ability to connect with his receivers is going to obviously be gives you a very optimistic sign. For CeeDee Lamb, of course, he had a big night. Unfortunately, there were some costly drops that was the main focus, and CeeDee Lamb even addressed it post-game. The same could be said about what happened with this Philadelphia Eagles defense. Jalen Carter being out, we saw a huge gaping hole within this defense. Javonte Williams was able to run effectively to start the game off. Had 2 touchdowns, had a great outing for anyone that may have started him. I know I'm very happy. I had him in one of my dynasty leagues, so it was really good to see him perform well. And a few takeaways, we saw that Jaden Blue was inactive for this game. Sanders also looked to be a little bit ineffective, had a big run for 49 yards before having a costly fumble late in that third quarter. And for Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts did exactly what you needed him to do. I know the stats weren't really intriguing. He barely threw for 150 yards, had 2 rushing touchdowns, but we saw him play perfect quarterback where he made the right decisions, was able to run when needed, and he just managed the game really well. And it is very easy to get caught up in game managing and having that be kind of seen as a negative connotation for quarterbacks, but he made the right decisions, was able to manage the clock really well. And as an Eagles fan, with all the distractions that we saw with Jalen Carter early on, I saw that Jalen Hurts was able to really manage the game in a way that really made it easy for Philadelphia, even despite the huge 1-hour delay that we saw in that game because of the weather conditions that were taking place in Philly. And now transitioning over to the matchup that we saw in Brazil, the Chiefs were upset by the Chargers 21-27. Justin Herbert had a fantastic outing, threw for over 318 yards, had 3 touchdowns on 25 on 34 attempts. Patrick Mahomes had a 24 for 39 outing on 258 yards, had 1 touchdown. He also carried the ball 6 times for 57 carries, had 1 touchdown. We also saw Hollywood Brown, highly involved in this offense, was a PPR machine with 10 receptions on 99 receiving yards. And Quentin Johnston, I can't imagine how many people drafted him in their leagues, but 5 receptions on 79 yards and 2 touchdowns, will probably be a very popular waiver wire addition for going into week 2. And then, of course, the rookie Omarion Hampton rushed for 15 carries, had 48 yards on the ground, and you like to see that usage there. The main thing that I'm just taking away from this game is that Justin Herbert looked fantastic. We did see a little bit of Najee there, but you can see that rushing work went exclusively to Omarion Hampton, which is fantastic. And then, of course, with the receptions, you saw that Ladd McConkey was heavily utilized. Keenan Allen is going to be highly involved here. Had 7 receptions, 68 yards, and 1 touchdown. But of course, obviously the main focus here is going to be how big of a night Quentin Johnston had, and I can only imagine that will be a point of emphasis going forward, especially for those in the waiver wire, considering that Trey Harris only had 1 reception on 11 yards. And then of course also same thing with Keandre Lambert-Smith, someone that was getting a lot of buzz in training camp, was not targeted, did not have any receiving yards, put up a complete goose egg for those that started him in fantasy. This of course I would imagine will be in deeper leagues. Let's go ahead and now go over some key matchups that I'm actually really intrigued with. The first one is going to start off in Carolina, where we have the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Carolina Panthers, and the main starter for me that I'm really looking forward to is going to be Ted McMillan. Carolina made a decision to trade Adam Thielen to the Minnesota Vikings, which means that you now have Ted McMillan, of course, now still being the alpha. I mean, he was drafted to be the alpha, being that he was a first-round pick, and Adam Thielen being traded doesn't really mean that he's going to get more targets, but what it does tell you is that the Carolina coaching staff and front office feels very comfortable having this kid be the #1 receiver for Bryce Young. And Bryce Young is someone that we saw, of course, turn the table around when we saw him benched for 5 games for Andy Dalton. And during that stretch, we saw that Bryce Young was a top 12 quarterback in fantasy. In his final 10 weeks, he had a touchdown in each game. So we saw a more confident, we saw a rejuvenated Bryce Young. And with this offense now hopefully taking a step forward, we expect that things will look even brighter for not only Bryce Young, but Ted McMillan. So the must start here, of course, will be Ted McMillan, someone who I'm really excited about. And he should be an easy, comfortable flex start for you, maybe even a potential wide receiver 2. And the reason why I'm going with Ted here is because Jacksonville should be a very juicy matchup. This defense was actually ranked in the bottom 3 in most fantasy points allowed on a point game basis to opposing wide receivers. And I actually want to take it a step further when it comes to this matchup. I'm actually also going to be very mindful of how these running backs are going to be doing, because on one side for Carolina, you have Chuba Hubbard, who broke out last year with 250 rushing attempts on 1,195 rushing yards. Also had a career high 11 total touchdowns, which was good for wide receiver 13, averaging 16 fantasy points per game. And you're going up against a defense here where they were ranked in the bottom 2. You had Jacksonville and Carolina actually both in the bottom 2 within this category of most points allowed to opposing running backs. And I think that Chuba Hubbard, with the very minimal running back competition that he has, if you look over here, he has only Rico Dowdle and Jonathan Brooks, who's been dealing with injuries. And Chuba Hubbard is going to be the one that will be leading this backfield and should be getting a lot of good volume to be a very solid start for you in week 1. For Jacksonville, Travis Etienne is someone that I'm also very confident starting this week, and I believe he's just due for a bounce back. I've already gone over why I'm big on Travis Etienne in general in this video that I'll tag over here up below in this card. But again, just like how we spoke about the matchup, Travis Etienne will be facing a Carolina Panthers defense that was in the bottom 2 in most points allowed to opposing running backs on a points per game basis. So you have Ted McMillan as a must start for me. You also have Bryce Young in deeper leagues as a very solid quarterback 2 option. And then when it comes to the running backs, both of these guys, Chuba Hubbard as well as Travis Etienne, are must starts and should be in every single lineup this week in week 1. Hey guys, we have a couple more matchups left to go over, but before we do so, if you are getting value, do me a solid. We are so close to 1,000 subs, and if you're getting any value, be sure to hit the like button as well as the subscribe button. Let's go over these last 2 matchups. Now, another matchup I want to focus on is going to be the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the reason why I'm very intrigued with this matchup is because this matchup should be very juicy for any Atlanta Falcons pass catcher. Now, we know the obvious start is going to be Drake London, and I've already gone over different videos as to why I'm big on Drake London this season. Of course, for starters, the connection that he has with Michael Penix and the great numbers he was putting up last season. But I also feel very confident starting Darnell Mooney in a flex spot if you are in a pinch. And I actually can't believe I'm going to say this, but I feel pretty confident starting Kyle Pitts. I don't know if my face was pretty convinced with that as I was saying it, but the reason why I feel a little bit optimistic is because of the matchup going up against the Bucs. The Buccaneers have allowed the most, in 2024, the Buccaneers allowed the most receiving yards to opposing tight ends, and they also were a bottom 8 defense when it came to most fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends on a points per game basis. And I understand that Pitts hasn't been the same game since his breakout in his rookie season. But this coaching staff here in Atlanta has been very adamant about making sure that they can get Pitts back. When you look at this screenshot here, this report right here that they were able to pull up from training camp, it says here that from Morris himself, he said that I think Kyle has been a talking point for all of us, when of course he's referring to the coaching staff. He says everybody is trying to duplicate his rookie season, and now that we have Michael Penix, the expectation as well as the reports that we've been hearing is that the chemistry with him and Penix has been very solid. So I expect that with the matchup being favorable, Pitts, believe it or not, is a must start for me in week 1 at that tight end position for any fantasy managers that were brave enough and bold enough to draft him. In week 1, we will have our first Monday Night Football matchup be a division rival, which will be a lot of fun, where you have the Chicago Bears going up against the Minnesota Vikings. And with Chicago, I think it's already noted, I'm really looking forward to seeing how they're going to be utilizing all these weapons that they have, because you already have Ben Johnson in place, and we know he's an offensive master genius. But you have DeAndre Swift, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore. You'll have even Alameda Zaccheaus, who's been getting a lot of noise. Colson Loveland at tight end. You have Cole Kmet there as well. So I'm really intrigued to see how they're going to be using all these weapons. And the matchup couldn't be much better, because you have Minnesota, who in 2024 was ranked last in most points allowed to opposing wide receivers. So that's why for me, you are going to see Rome Odunze be a must start for me. Same with DJ Moore. But I want to focus in more on Rome Odunze. And I know that he had a pretty solid rookie campaign. And the reason why I'm kind of saying solid was because he saw 100 targets, which was fantastic, but he only was barely able to get a little over 50 receptions from that. With Rome Odunze, he was the 11th ranked wide receiver in deep targets, while also being ranked 2nd in unrealized air yards, which just speaks to the opportunity that there was in this passing game. And with the hiring of Ben Johnson, I believe that this will help fine-tune some things with Caleb Williams. And one thing I wanted to go over too, last season, despite the whatever season we want to categorize for Rome Odunze, he actually was 10th among all wideouts and red zone targets. And for context, that's more than his fellow rookie mates, Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, who had fantastic seasons. So I'm trusting that with the offense that will now be instilled, that will feature him as the clear alpha. I mean, you're hearing this all throughout training camp, that he's been really making the right progression, and that the Lions really do see him as the alpha in this wide receiver room. I believe that with the matchup that he has versus Minnesota, he is going to be a must start and will actually do fantastic in this matchup versus the Vikings. And in conclusion, we're going to stick here in this matchup, because another thing that I'm looking forward to for this week in week 1 is going to be how Minnesota is going to be utilizing Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones. Now, we've seen the ADP for Jordan Mason increase week over week as the season was getting closer, and there's been reports about how Kevin O'Connell wants to utilize this backfield as a 1A, 1B approach, where you have Aaron Jones as the clear 1A, and then you have Mason as the 1B. And you see here as well in this quote that we have from Kevin O'Connell, he's speaking about how they want to take off as many touches as possible from Aaron Jones because he operates better. And here's the quote actually right here. Let me actually quote it exactly. It says here, Jones is at his best when his workload is smaller. Having that second back to share the load with him has been huge when it comes to keeping him fresh and healthy. And that, I'm sure, is going to be something that the Vikings are going to be very mindful of, considering that Aaron Jones played 17 games last season, saw fantastic usage, but they're of course a little bit concerned that this cannot be sustainable. And that's why I'm very intrigued to see how this will actually play out, because Mason is someone that we believe will be very effective in this offense. And with the matchup being favorable, I believe that Mason will be a must-start option, even if it's a flex spot, considering that this Vikings team wants to minimize as many touches as possible to keep Aaron Jones healthy. And I think that with the opportunities plus the strong efficiency metrics that we saw Mason do last season, I believe that he will be a fantastic starting option for you in week 1. Hey, you made it to the very end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. And as I get closer to 1,000 subscribers, I cannot thank you all enough for your support. So if you found value, do me a huge favor, hit the like button as well as the subscribe button, and check out some of these other videos here that'll help you out as we are now officially into the fantasy football season. Best of luck to you in week 1. Until next time, take care. God bless. Peace.